Welcome back, legends. I hope you're all fantastic. It is time for another installment of Friday Q&A. As always, to everybody who submitted a question this week, thank you so much for your question. I look forward to answering as many of them as possible. If you've got questions for next week, put them in the comments section below. And as always, if you want to support the channel either by buying some of the music that I make with my band Ragdoll, we just put out a new live album, for example, or you can support me directly on Patreon. Let's get into this week's questions. A few of you have noticed that right there, although, so a few of you have noticed that I've got a Hydrasynth here. I actually did a video with it talking about why I decided to buy that particular synthesizer and why I wanted to buy a synthesizer in the first place. But how's it going? It's pretty amazing. I've really been enjoying it. And for anybody who's roughly familiar with the Hydra and what it does, there is just so much going on with that if you dive into it and you want to get deep with that particular instrument. But at the same time, you can just use all the surface level controls and have some fun just pulling classic sounds or doing sound design. And I've mostly just been surfing some of my favorite presets and trying to learn some of my favorite like 70s and 80s songs on keyboard. So like trying to learn how to play Jump for somebody who's not a keyboard player. That's a big challenge. That's something that is definitely a work in progress. Another one, I think my ultimate song to learn to play on synth is Separate Ways by Journey. So I've been clunking my way through that. And that one actually turns out it's not too bad a song for someone who's basically a beginner when it comes to playing keyboard instruments. Also, I discovered that you can use the like expression strip on it as a theremin. So I've been having ridiculous amounts of fun with that. And the other great thing about the Hydra is I think the built-in effects are amazing, especially the reverb. So yeah, if you've got the money for something like that and you're looking to either get your first really awesome synthesizer or you just want a really great sounding synth that can cover a lot of ground, as a guitar player who basically knows nothing about keyboards and synthesizers, I can recommend it. This one comes from Konstantinos. Shout out to Konstantinos, a longtime subscriber and viewer and question asker on the channel. How do I go about isolating and carving out harsh frequencies in a guitar tone on the axe? I think Konstantinos was talking about the Fractal Deliverance model. Amazing model, such a great sounding rock and metal amp in there. But I do have a video talking about, I call it tone sculpting. So using the parametric EQ, using the solo feature, sweeping it around, and then using the multi-band compressor. So for the really high-end stuff, normally between like 3 and 5, 6K, I'll use the parametric EQ and carve that right out. But then for the kind of low-end muck stuff, I'll normally use a multi-band compressor. So if you go back through some of my older videos, maybe look for one called Sculpting Tones with parametric EQ, something like that. You can check out my approach to that. Alternatively, if you've got something like FabFilter Pro Q3 in your DAW, you can record a clip and then you can just kind of loop it around and figure out what the frequencies are there and then pump that into the axe. So this question, I guess, is a bit of a riff on the, you know, if you could jam with anyone, who would it be? But if I could pick a few guests to have on Sensitive Sundays, what would be the ultimate guests? And I think the first one that comes to mind is Mr. Sensitive himself, my favorite melodic rock guitar player, Neil Schon. Because basically all those videos I do, I just think to myself, what would Neil do and how would he approach playing something really tasty over all of this? So yeah, that would be an absolute, you know, desert island request there, to have someone like Neil. Basically like all my favorite players that I can think of, you know, the gods that I kind of worship, John Sykes, Paul Gilbert, George Lynch, that would all be ridiculous. There's quite a few players who are, I guess you could call contemporary players. You know, they're putting out music, they have YouTube channels who I really admire, who I do want to reach out to in the new year and do some videos with them. So if that's something you would all like to see, like if you'd like to see more guest slots on those videos, get in the comments below and let me know some players you would love to hear, and maybe hit them up as well and say, hey, you and Leon need to talk and do something together, because that's my favorite thing about the internet, that potential for collaboration. So leave a comment, let me know who you would like to see, and we'll work on it. Don't know if I can get Neil Sean, probably can't afford Neil, but maybe some other people who you would all like to see. That would be amazing. This is the spicy question for the week. How do I go about dealing with unsolicited advice? And this is a great question, and something that I feel like everybody struggles with, either for like their entire life, whether it is just about music or whether it's, the uncle at Christmas who's sitting there telling you, going, you know what you need to do? You need to cut your hair and get a real job. For anyone in Australia, remember that ad, get a haircut and get a real job? See, I proved them wrong. I don't have a real job and I didn't get a haircut. Wait, maybe that does prove it. Nevertheless, one thing that is undeniable about playing music in a band, let's just restrict it to that, is that someone is going to come up to you with the best intentions and say something along the lines of, hey, you guys sounded great. You would sound even better if you had an extra rhythm guitar player in the band. And when we started off, especially as a three-piece, that used to bug me so much. And I've just come to realize there's nothing you can do about it. And the reality is that person who said that probably meant it in a good way, saying like, hey, if you sound really good as a three-piece, wouldn't you sound even better as like a 12-piece band? But I can almost guarantee they're not lying awake at night thinking about that comment, or thinking about how much better the thing that they've just experienced would have been if there was an extra guitar player, or if you didn't tune to drop C, or if your singer dyed his beard purple, whatever. People are going to be giving you unsolicited advice all the time, and I'm not saying block it out, but like anything, take it with a pinch of salt. And often the best kind of advice is that advice that, offers something maybe a little bit critical, but also something constructive. The ones that really kind of stick with you and you're like, you know what? Maybe that person has a point. And if it's unsolicited advice, that's a bonus, the way I see it. So the way I deal with unsolicited advice isn't just to ignore it, is to just kind of say, hey, you know what? The fact that that person thought that it was a good idea to take time out of their life to maybe try to say something constructive. If it's not constructive at all, you can just give them the finger and get on with it. And at the end of the day, if you're out there trying to do something, this is something that's just going to happen. It's something that comes with the territory. And honestly, don't worry about it too much. Couple of gear-related questions, specifically rack-related questions. Let's get these all done at once. The Digitech GSP-1101. I have not tried one. I've been looking for one. It seems to be the only one-space rack unit out there that can do effects and impulse response loading. So kind of interested in it from that perspective. I want to hear how good the IR loading capacity is in it. And, it seems like a unit where if you wanted to go direct, you could have your amp, a load box, and that for all your effects and IR loading, and it's one rack unit. So that's one, hopefully in 2022, I can try out. The next one is, would I recommend a PCM81 or an MPX one from Lexicon? This totally depends on, I guess, how deep you're willing to dive with effects. I think for your average guitar player who just wants some nice delays, reverbs, and choruses, the MPX one is fantastic. It still stacks up really well, and I still recommend that unit to a lot of people. The PCM81 will do a lot of the things that the MPX one does. It just does it in a different way, and you really have to understand the way the algorithms are structured on there. You can also dive so deep into that particular unit and do some amazing stuff. So they don't totally overlap. Like, you can't put a reverb in the feedback loop of the delay on the PCM81, but you can on the MPX one. That's kind of a cool thing. But at the same time, you don't have a diffusion control for your delays in the MPX one. You need to use that reverb in the loop feedback trick. So yeah, they're actually kind of different animals. I think, you know, the PCM81 is definitely more designed with like a mixing or live sound, and if you're a crazy guitar player wanting to try one out in your rack use, whereas the MPX one is very much geared towards being a little bit easier to use and a little bit kind of more plug and play for guitar players. And on that note, can you do a circular delay with the MPX one? Turns out you can kind of fudge it in there if you use the dual delay and you use cross feedback. For example, take like one delay at 250, one delay at 500, add cross feedback, you're gonna get a center delay at 750 milliseconds, and then you can put reverb in the effects loop of the delay so that it kind of gets diffused. So yeah, you can get a pretty awesome sounding circular style delay out of the MPX one. And one last rack related one, have I ever tried the Delta Labs Effectron as used by Alex Lifeson? I haven't, but I feel like I know somebody who has one, and if that person is watching it, I've probably already chatted to this person about it after I've done this video, so you might actually see a Delta Lab on the channel very soon, provided I'm actually thinking of the unit and it's not something else. So there's all the rack related questions for the week. How do I keep this Majestic mane so majestic? It's not looking super majestic at the moment. It's a little bit greasy because I haven't washed it this week, but you know, I do the old double shampoo and then a bit of conditioner in there. And I'm also very lucky genetically, where like my dad and my mum both have really, really lovely hair. So I definitely had nothing to do with that, yet I'm benefiting from it. And then I also just try to eat pretty well. You know, I think a large part of your overall, you know, well-being, whether it's your hair on your head or other places of your body or your skin or things like that. I have eczema, so I've always struggled with my skin. So I've always been hyper aware about, you know, what you put into your body ultimately ends up being kind of what you wear on it, whether it's, like I said, your skin or your hair or other things like that. So yeah. I'm just waiting for the day where I can get a shampoo or conditioner company to sponsor some of my videos, and then I will do the ultimate Majestic mane video, and you can all tap out and go, Leon has finally 100% sold out. How would I go about getting a Petrucci style tone with something like a H&K Black Spirit and an H9 and a few other things? I think the general idea for John's tone is, you know, it's so based around the Boogie Mark series, and the Boogie Mark series themselves are based around getting the pre-EQ and the post-EQ kind of right. So what I would suggest adding to your setup if you're using this would be something like a graphic EQ that you can place before the amp, as well as one after the amp. You know, something like the Boss EQ 200 will let you do this, and I think the new Source Audio EQ lets you do that as well. And the general idea would be you want to cut bass in the pre-gain section and add a bunch of mid-range and then distort it, so you get that really kind of rich, harmonically juicy distortion. And then afterwards you boost bass, you cut out some of that honky mid-range and you boost the high end, the kind of classic Boogie Mark series thing. And that should translate pretty well. It's not a bad way to kind of hack a Petrucci style tone on just about anything aside from a Mark series amp. You know, the Marks do the thing. That is all for this week, legends. Thank you so much for checking out the video, and as always, thank you so much for your continued support. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. See you next time.